I want to start by acknowledging my fire and beautiful white sage to cleanse and hold space. I've already smudged myself in this room. I'm going to put my sage right here to burn. Let it continue to smoke. And again, just ask Grandmother Fire to hold space. Grateful to the fire for transmuting things that no longer serve. So today I want to talk part 2 about Mormon Masons. And if you haven't already watched part 1, I'll put it in the description. I'm not going to repeat much of what was said in the first video, but there are some things I kind of wanted to clarify. And first, I also want to say the reason that I'm doing this podcast in the first place, From Mormon to Mystic, is to tell my story about Mormonism, my journey out of the church, how I was raised, giving myself permission to speak hard things like today, tomorrow or next time's topic as well. I'm not doing this for likes. I'm not doing this for comments. I'm not doing this for money. I'm doing this for myself, first and foremost, to be able to speak my truth, to encourage other women to speak their truths, and to speak up even when it's hard, when it's scary. So yeah, my name's Mindy, and I did write a book, Sacred Light, My Journey from Mormon to Mystic. I'll probably put a link to the book in the description as well. So I'm basically sharing my journey on this podcast. And right now, last video talking about Mormon Masons was kind of laying the foundation for the family I grew up in. I'm specifically going to talk about my father, which I've already talked little bits and pieces about him, my family of origin. But this stuff that's coming up is important, important part of my story. And so Mormon Masons are not the same as Freemasons. Mainstream Freemasonry is very different, but Mormonism, it was founded, and like the Book of Mormon comes from Freemasonry. I don't think a lot of people know that connection between the Book of Mormon and Freemasonry. Book of Mormon was in place, and Joseph Smith was comparing himself to Enoch, and the story of Enoch well before he organized the church. So Freemasonry was the foundation of the Mormon church. The temple endowments didn't come into play till the church was about 12 years old. So some people might not understand that truly the roots of Mormonism is Freemasonry. And when Mormons left Nauvoo with Brigham Young, 1846, 1847, that time period, on the church's website, it says that they shut down the Masonic lodges. And from that point on, there were no more Masonic lodges within the Mormon church. That those Mormons who were Masons, they want you to believe they just stopped practicing Masonry because they didn't build lodges when they came to Utah. And that little piece, okay, yeah, is true. They didn't build lodges for the specific purpose of Freemasonry, but they built meeting houses, and that is where the Mormon Masons would hold their meetings. The LDS church houses are also Mormon Masonic lodges. So the church lied by twisting the truth, or omitting some truth. And then Masonic temples are Mormon temples. they took the Masonic rituals and built temples, now all over the world to do the Masonic rituals. So when Brigham Young came west and settled in Utah, Masonic Mormonism went underground. It was still practiced, but it wasn't like you could just go sign up to be a Mormon Mason. Okay, you had to be recruited. My grandfather was recruited by Heber J. Grant, the prophet of the church at the time. He was a bishop and working very closely with him, building the Martin Harris Monument in Clarkston, Utah. My grandfather was recruited into this secret society within Mormonism, which is a secret society in and of itself. Mormonism is trying to pretend they are like mainstream Christians, but they are not. Mormonism absolutely is a secret society, and they discourage their members from joining secret societies because you quickly will find out that Mormonism is a secret society. And that goes back also to the roots of the foundation of the church. It had secret societies from the very beginning within. The Dannonites were a secret society that did the dirty work for the prophets, Joseph Smith and Brigham Young and John Taylor. I mean, it was a secret society that mainstream Mormons probably don't know. I didn't know about it until I left the church and started doing some research on the history of the church. So Mormonism has a foundation of being a secret society, and within that society of Mormonism, creating other secret societies. And there's people, Till Swan is one of the people that have spoken out about her sexual abuse that happened within the Mormon church. I would call the people that were trafficking her and using her for her gifts and her abilities as a sect of Mormonism that was a secret society. And she actually came from very close into proximity, was raised in the same location of my grandfather and my father, where they grew up, very close to the border of Idaho. So Mormon Masons are a secret society within Mormonism, and you don't just go sign up for it. You have to be recruited into it. And Mormons are very good at keeping secrets. It's why the government loves to hire Mormons. It's why, the FBI, CIA loves to get Mormons to work for them, because they're very good at keeping secrets. They're very good at lying for the Lord. If they think they're right in their justification, they can lie through their teeth and not feel guilt about it. So they are great to work as double agents or work, both sides, because they don't have any problem lying. And the Mormon church was built on lies and secrets. Joseph Smith's whole life revolved around so many lies and secrets about polygamy. So yeah, lying for the Lord, it justifies doing a lot of really horrible things. And that is the foundation of Mormonism. And to think that that is not alive and well today is being naive. So I talked in the last video about my grandfather's recruitment into Mormon Masonry. My grandfather was a narcissist, very controlling, stern, not loving. I don't have a whole lot of memories of him because I was about 11 when he died. But I remember my grandmother and my father and how they interacted. My father was the oldest son, but he was the fifth child born. So he had 4 older sisters and there was 10 living children. My father was very narcissistic, and a lot of Mormons tend to be. I think there's this idea when you're raised with the notion that you have the only truth. You have this giant secret that nobody else in the world, other than, the other Mormons that are in on this secret, have. There is this, the ability to take someone who already has narcissistic tendencies and blow it up. Mormonism can do that. It can give people a really big head because they are so sure in what they know and sure in what they believe and the stories that, we've been told. It very much puts Mormons against the whole rest of the world and, us versus them mentality. So that's how my father was. And I did not see how bad the narcissism was until I left the church and eventually got disowned by him. And that's a story I've only touched on. So yeah, I want to share some things about my father today that also will be a little hard for maybe some of my family to hear, and that they probably wouldn't agree with. But like I said, this is a space for me to speak my truth, my perspective, my experiences. So when I left off on part 1, my father had served in World War II in the Navy, and he was working in the Navy, in a Navy base in California. And his father, my grandfather, had called him to come home to Utah. My grandfather was very controlling, and he wanted my dad to be in Utah, so he could be a little bit more under his thumb. So my dad did come back to Utah, but he did not come back to where my grandfather wanted him to be. He served. He started working in Hill Air Force Base. And he was a civilian working on a military base. And there is a man that he worked for, his boss, and I had debated about using his real name. Let's see. No. Not. Sorry, I was going to have this pulled up. Part2. Yeah. There's the man that my father worked for, was known as being the Berlin Candy Bomber in World War II. After he served in World War II, but he was known for dropping candy out of his airplane to children over Germany. He did that for a really long time. He became known as the Candy Bomber. His name is Gail Halverson. My father worked for him. He's LDS. He was LDS. This man is dead, just like my father. So my father came to work on Hill Air Force Base under his command. And he tells a lot of stories. So let's back up. Like I said, my father is very narcissistic, and before he died, he made my sister write this book sharing his legacy, basically. Writing everything down that was important to him about his life, except for his work. That he wanted it in a different book. And that book has never been published yet. My sister still is 8 years now after his death. She's still working on it, and I have to wonder if it will ever be published. My father very much wanted his work experience book published, and in fact, I have the title of it, 32 Secrets for Success, Exclusive PepCon Explosion, Critical Insights, and the D.B. Cooper and Martin Luther King Connection. My dad knew secrets about the government, and he died believing he knew who D.B. Cooper was, and D.B. Cooper's connection to Martin Luther King. That is in his workbook. This is his life history, and my sister is still yet to publish his workbook. She did lend me a copy of it, and I'm not really going to go into that story, but it is this book, the work history. When I got this, it just put one of the missing pieces into place, because I suspected my father was a Mormon Mason, but I didn't know how my father got recruited into that, because it was clear he did not want to follow in his father's footsteps. He was not going to be recruited into the Mormon Masons through his father. And when I started reading about his work at Hill Air Force Base under the Candy Bomber, the missing pieces for him being recruited into Masonry, Mormon Masonry, fell into place for me. So he had some really important jobs at Hill Air Force Base. And his story, the way he tells it in his book, is also not exactly truthful and forthcoming in how he tells his story. But one of the things that he talks about was how he was accused of stealing from Hill Air Force Base, and how it was all just a misunderstanding, because my dad is, a Mormon, and in his eyes perfect, and would never steal from a company. And he was called in by his boss, and my father at this point has secret clearance for the government, and his boss calls him in and shows him his secret file, and accuses him of stealing, and they have this conversation, and he proves that he really didn't steal. He had a friend buy something. The whole story is very fishy, but he claims he got out of the situation, and in the process, he learned from his boss that they had been surveilling my dad. That his boss, now I'm going to quote from his book, his boss told him, quote, "Because of the position you are in and the fact that you have secret clearance, your file is the biggest of anyone on this plant." See, I think that is my dad and his narcissism coming out. I don't really believe my dad had the biggest file out of all the generals and everybody else in the Hill Air Force Base. But that's what my dad says. Back to the quote. Probably his boss, the Candy Bomber, says, "I probably know more about you than you know about yourself. I know where you buy your clothes, where you shop, where your wife shops, what you do with your free time. I know everything about you." So my father already has secret clearance within the government. He's working at Hill Air Force Base. He's working under a Mormon who is, I believe, 100% a Mormon Mason, because of what comes next. And my father claims that he was stepping on toes, and people in the military base were unhappy with him. But he didn't care. The way my dad tells it, he didn't care, and he was just going to do his job regardless. And the result was that he was blackballed. And I'm going to quote from him again. He calls the candy bomber Mr. Smith because he didn't want to, at the time he was writing this, he was still alive. Gail was still alive, but he's since passed. So he calls him Mr. Smith in his story, but he's talking about the candy bomber. He comes into his office and tells my dad, he says, I want to talk to you, but first you must promise that you will never tell anyone what I'm about to tell you. It is extremely important that my name never be connected to this conversation, which is probably why my dad didn't want to use his real name. If what I tell you gets out, I will be court-martialed and kicked out of the service. It would be a horrible ordeal for me. My dad answered and said, I give you my word that will not happen. I will not tell anyone. And I kept my word. In fact, until I started to write this book, I had not told anyone this story. Last night, this is the Candyman talking. Last night, high-level officers on the base met. They are all Masons. Now notice he did not call them Freemasons. He just used the word Masons, which to me is code Masons, Mormon Masons. These men are Mormons, Masons, part of this secret organization. They are all Masons, and as part of their meetings, they talk about individuals. Your name came up. This is my dad. Someone wanted to vote on you, and this is how voting works. Everyone receives a brown ball and a black ball. A container is passed around, and everyone drops in one ball. When the container is opened, if there is even one black ball, the person being voted on will no longer get a raise, a new job, or anything else while working at the base. He said, last night, you, my dad, were blackballed. The Candyman goes on to say, according to my dad's book, he says, John, I like and trust you. My advice is to get out of here while you still can get a good recommendation. Find a job outside of the military. It is in your best interest. My dad said this was hard to hear. I did not want to leave my job. And then he tells the Candyman, I will never bring up this conversation to anyone, but I'm not going to leave Hill Air Force Base. I'm going to continue to do the job to the best of my ability. And then he goes on to tell a few other things that happened because of being blackballed. He still did his job, but another man came in to shadow him. And my dad was supposed to train this other man to take over my dad's job. And my dad asked, okay, well, what's going to happen to me after I get him trained? And they would not answer that question. And so this goes on for a few months. This man, Mr. Johnson, is supervising my dad while being taught by my dad how to do the job so that he could take over from my dad. And then my dad says, one day, a man I had worked with, doesn't give specifics, was stationed at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base headquarters. He called and said, John, we have a special project coming up. We want you to handle it. This program is highly classified. You will need to have top secret clearance. We need you to get started on the paperwork. Once you have it, then I can get you the information needed for this assignment. So he's getting what looks like a promotion, not being blackballed. That's very suspicious. So my father applies for top secret clearance and he gets it. And the man that was shadowing him, he's like, well, if he's doing top secret clearance, I want to do it too. And According to my dad's story, my dad got the top secret clearance and this other man got kicked off the base. Something in his application for the top secret clearance didn't fly. And so he got let go. According to my father, this is all just, secondhand. So my dad gets his top secret clearance and starts working on this top secret military project, which was a sad... So the military was conducting atomic bomb testing in the South Pacific. And his job was to help rig jet fighters to fly into the clouds, atomic clouds, and collect data so that they could learn about the atomic clouds. That was just his first top secret government project that he was willing to put in the book. There were many others after that one that could not go in the book. My father was not, after the Black Ball incident, I believe 100%, that is when my father was recruited into the Masons, because the Candyman had his back. The Candyman, or the Candy Bomber, Gail Halverson, had my dad's back. And I think that was the beginning of, so we're talking, the year here is 1952, 51, 52. So after being blackballed, he's promoted and given top secret clearance. That does not sound like somebody who was truly blackballed. That sounds like somebody who was brought into the fold and told the secrets, which I believe 100% that my father was recruited and continued to do top secret work for the government. He worked on the F-89 weapons system. He does talk about that in his book. And atomic missiles. He started to have contacts with the Pentagon. And he was one of those people who actually had a regular phone on his desk and then the Pentagon red phone on his desk. And it would ring. And my father would do what he was told to do because he's a good Mormon. And now he's a good Mormon Mason. So he's up there. If you look up Gail Halverson, you will not find anything in his obituary or anything that connects him to Freemasonry. It is a secret. It is a secret part of Mormonism. It's a secret part of the government too. Not the government as far as that organization, but that the government likes to use that organization. And my father was one of them. I do want to say at this time, MK Ultra is also going on in top secret government places. And my father has a connection with that. Now, my oldest siblings are small children at this point. My parents have 3 kids at this point. And I will say that one of my siblings was used in that operation experiment. My father was a big believer in mind control, and that he could control the people that he worked for with his mind, with manipulation through his mind, his thoughts, that he could manipulate people, not just, the people working for him, but the people working above him and his children, his family. And I believe 100% that was learned while he was working at Hill Air Force Base in the 1950s. He was there from 1951 through 1959. And then my father, after working at the Hill Air Force Base, he gets moved to Thiokol, that builds the rocket boosters and the rockets for the space program. And he becomes the safety manager over there. That's what I'm going to talk about next time, is his connection to the space shuttle program, the space shuttle Challenger explosion, and the aftermath of that. And for me, that's one of the most disgusting and hardest secrets of my dad for me to swallow. Like, I did not want to believe the things that I found out about that. But I'm going to share that next time, because that is a story that deserves a lot more attention. So my dad has contacts with Pentagon. My dad has contacts with NASA, the space program. He has involvement with MK Ultra, secret government programs. My father is part of that. And the ripple effect that this had on my family of origin, the family that I grew up in, I will say is my father believed, he could control his children with mind control. And I would say for the most part, it worked until his children got free of him, got out of the house. The one sibling that went through the MK Ultra program, she came out with multiple personalities. And I have talked to her about sharing this because that's not my story, it's hers. And so I'm not going to tell the things that she went through, other than it did leave her with multiple personalities. And I love this. I love my sister so much, who went through so much pain and horror in my family and came out the other end. I believe, things happen for a reason. As children, we pick our parents. On the other side, I truly believe our families, our soul families, we're together to learn lessons from each other, to learn to grow our soul. And so, yeah, she came out the other end of the shit that she went through as an amazing person. But our family was always fragmented. My family of origin was always fragmented because of the narcissism of my parents, my grandparents, and secrets. I mentioned a little bit in the Mason part 1 about my church house. My grandfather was accused of sexual abuse. I witnessed children being abused that I believe happened in our church house. I tried to find a picture of the church because it was unique. And I couldn't even find a picture of it, which really surprised me. I could find a picture of the current house, or church house that's sitting there, but not the one that was destroyed that I remembered and grew up in. I know my parents probably have a picture of it. So maybe this summer, as I go through their things, I'll find one. But I know abuse happened in that church house. And I know, like father, like son, that my dad was also an abuser. Physically, mentally, for sure, and sexually. And luckily, when I got married, we moved away pretty quickly. And when we came back, we were not close. So I don't feel like my children were victims, but any victim is one too many. That's just a hard thing to admit that. But my father, as soon as he got a computer at home, there was porn on it. He was one of those, until the day he died, basically, he had pornography addiction. And I did not know that until my children found it on his computer when we were visiting one time at his home. And one of my sons had to do some homework, and my dad didn't protect things very well, and my son found it on his computer. And then after he died, I asked my sister to get some pictures off of his phone, and I just picked it up and went to my computer and plugged it in and started the process. And she came running over to me, and I was like, "What?" She's like, "Well, I just want to be sure he got all the pornography off Dad's phone." I was like, "Oh my God." Like, I knew he had it on his computer, but I did not know my 89-year-old father still had porn on his phone when he died. Like, that to me is just gross. My father was very old school Mormonism. He believed he had to have a second wife in order to get into the celestial kingdom. So after my mother passed in 2014, my dad is 86 at this point, and he wants to find his second wife. And he ends up harassing a woman in his ward that's divorced and has some children. He ends up asking her repeatedly to marry him. Now, she definitely could have married him and gotten a free ride. She would have gotten a gorgeous home, lots of money. And my dad only lived like 2.5 years after my mom passed. 2.5 years. I mean, thank God she didn't think it was worth it. And she told my father no, and ended up moving out of the ward to avoid my dad. I know she did have a tender spot in her heart for my dad, because she viewed him like a grandfather figure. I mean, she was younger than me. And she liked, that for her kids, so they would go visit him. But thank God she didn't fall for his mind control bullshit and didn't marry him. But that was also one of his dying thoughts, was about this woman and who was going to take care of her. He really thought she was supposed to be his second wife. So I've talked about being disowned by my father in a separate video. That happened in Memorial Weekend in 2015. And then I didn't have a whole lot of contact with my father other than just some checking in once a month. And in August, he had softened by August a little bit, and it was no longer that he didn't want any contact. He did want contact because he thought he could change my mind about Mormonism. And that he asked me and one of my sons to come help him at his cabin in Bear Lake. And I said we would. The bathtub had fallen through the floor of the trailer that he had on this property, and he wanted us to somehow push it back up into place. And that's where my younger son came in. He was a sophomore or junior at the time, so he could crawl under the trailer house and kind of hold up the bathtub while my dad and I worked on securing it. So it was kind of a 3-person job. So my dad reached out to me for help, and I said we would go help him. And we stayed at his house the night before. We drove the night before we were driving up to fix the cabin. And it was at lunch. My son and I were talking with my dad. It was just the 3 of us. And that was when he spilled about mind control and how he used it at work and how he could control people. And I laughed at him when he first started talking about it. I was like, you cannot control people. I said, that's ridiculous, Dad. You cannot make people do what you want them to do. I said, if you could do that, I would be Mormon. I would have come back to church because you tried everything, in May to get me to come back. And I said, you couldn't do it. You can't change my mind. And he got really serious, and he was like, yeah, I know. I've lost control of you. You're right. I cannot control you anymore. And that just shocked the hell out of me. I'm like, well, when did you have control over me? And then that made me rethink some things about my childhood and all the way up into my teenage years until I got married. And he admitted it was when we got married and moved, when I had moved out of state. He tried, and I know when it was that he tried to manipulate me into doing something for him after we'd been in Colorado for just a little bit of time, and he could not change my mind. And that was when he knew his mind control no longer worked with me. And it quickly wore off on one of my other sisters when she also left the state of Utah. And I remember as a child, because she's 15 years older than me, I remember times when she would come home and visit, and I would get to play with her kids because they were close to my age. And my father, I remember them having conversations and him really, really trying to manipulate her to come back to the church. And being a child and witnessing my father and my sister go at it, not in an argumentative way, but in a very, they were both very calm, but it was like everything he threw at her, she just threw right back. And so he lost control of the 3 siblings that left the Mormon church and left the state of Utah. Let's see if there's anything else. I kind of want to wrap this up. So 2015, when we go help my dad in Bear Lake to fix his tub, there were so many things that came out in our conversation that were just red flags. And the mind control was one of the red flags. And I'd already started this down the rabbit hole of Freemasonry and Mormonism and the connection, and was starting to, I had talked to the Mormon historians, so I knew that there was this secret society of Mormon Masons. I knew my grandfather was a part of that, but I did not know how my father got in. I did not know this piece of the puzzle with Hill Air Force Base and his top secret clearance and his involvement with MK Ultra. And that trip to Bear Lake was what opened the door for me to start investigating my dad's connection to the Space Shuttle Challenger's explosion. And my father always said that if he had been in charge, he would have stopped it. They would not have launched that day. And I believed him. I was, a senior, and I watched it with the whole rest of the world explode. And it wasn't until, almost 30 years later that I learned the truth about that. I'm going to share that next time. Mormon Masons, a secret society within the Mormon Church, are real. You don't just go sign up for it. You're recruited. Just like the Danonites in the early days. A secret society within a secret society. What I found out after that conversation with my dad at the cabin and before we left, that was a turning point for everything for me, in just wanting to know the truth, wanting to know what my dad knew before and after the space shuttle exploded. Because my father benefited from that event. And I believe he never had any intention of stopping that explosion, stopping that event from happening, even though that's what he said till I confronted him. And so, yeah, I'm going to leave it there. And talk about that next time. Takeaways from today. Important takeaways from my father's secrets. He was a Mormon Mason. He was recruited from Hill Air Force Base by other Mormon Masons. He was blackballed, and then he was promoted. And received top secret clearance and started to work with high up officials in the Pentagon, later with NASA, and was addicted to porn, was accused after his death of sexually abusing people. That is our legacy. And like I said at the beginning, he thinks he has the answer knows who D.B. Cooper was and how D.B. Cooper was tied to Martin Luther King. I might touch on that next time. Yeah, because that's enough. My dad's secrets are like a never-ending black hole. But it's good for me to get it off my chest. I'm not sharing this really for anyone other than myself to speak the truth about it. It was heartbreaking. When I finally put all the pieces together, it was about 2 years ago when I finally got the last piece of the puzzle, which was this book that he had written before he died, that my sister is supposed to. That was the last piece of the puzzle, to help me understand the space shuttle mess that was made, and how he got to go in and clean it up and benefited from that disaster. My father never once, in my presence, showed any remorse for the people that lost their lives. And it was, Thiakol's fault. My father was the safety manager over the entire plant. It was my father's fault. And he escaped being held accountable. Other people took the fall. And my father just got to stand back and say, yeah, if I'd have been in charge, I wouldn't have let it go. I wouldn't have let it fly. Which was bullshit. It's another one of those, it's a lying for the Lord moment. My father felt justified in lying, because he knew that's not true. Because he could have stopped it. He had just no intention. That was a sacrifice. That was a sacrifice where I think one point in time where Freemasons and Mormon Masons worked together for something really horrific. No, I'll tell that story next time. So yeah, that's enough for today. Namaste.